Hi guys, my name is Mayana. Welcome to Mayo Core. Today I'm going to be giving you the ultimate guide to fall reads. I have my humidifier going, I have my coffee, I have my cozy outfit. I am ready to get into this, okay? Originally I wasn't gonna do one of these because I do one every year, and I even did spooky reads in October, but I saw Kari Can Read do one of these and it was like super long, and I watched the entire thing and I loved it. And I was like, you know what, let me do like a super long, like all-encompassing read. And so that's what I'm gonna do. I have them split into sections and everything. And I haven't done like an autumn reads on this channel, and I don't, looking at it, I think about it, I don't think I really do like autumn books. I usually do like spooky books. Let's just get into it. I have different sections. So the first section I have is cozy paranormal. This is a genre that I kind of named myself, I feel like, but like if that's actually a thing, like I don't want to take credit for it, but that's just what I call it. And so what cozy paranormal is like basically cozy paranormal romances. The first book that I want to recommend is Not Your Average Hot Guy. I know sometimes people wonder like why I recommend things that I didn't love, and it's because just because I didn't love something doesn't mean that it's not a good book, and it could be someone's favorite book. Not Your Average Hot Guy is about this girl who works in a escape room, and these weird people come in and they like take this random book and they start like trying to do spells and shit, and basically they end up summoning this demon. So now the main character and this demon have to work together to stop this weird freaky cult. The next book I have is My Roommate is a Vampire. I read this one a few summers ago. I absolutely loved it. It is about this girl who lives in Chicago. She does not have anywhere to go in life, and she ends up finding this apartment for like really cheap, and she's like, what the fuck is wrong with it? But then again, rent is so expensive, she doesn't even want to question it. So she ends up moving in with this guy, and he only comes out at night, and he's just really weird, and kind of find out he's a vampire. I thought this book was really funny. I absolutely love this book. I thought it was amazing. And then I have The Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon, and this is about a girl who's a witch, and she can't really use her powers. Like, she really sucks at magic, so she doesn't really use it, and her mom kind of looks down upon her. So one day when she's trying to do a spell, she ends up accidentally summoning a demon, and then they end up fake dating because she just wants her mom to be more proud of her. And I also have The X-Hex, which is like so popular. Everyone talked about it. It's about this girl who, she put this curse on her ex-boyfriend, and she didn't think it worked because he ended up moving like out of the country anyways. But then he comes back to town to fix the ley lines, and it turns out that the curse was very much real and it worked. And so now they have to work together to fix this curse that she put on him. And so next I have Supernatural. So for the first book I have is Cemetery Boys. This is about a boy who ends up in the cemetery. I forget what the mystery was, but I remember I read this on Halloween like a few years ago, and it was a 5-star book, and it was just so amazing. Like, it was just such a good book to end off the spooky season with. Like, absolutely amazing. It was about this boy who is trans, and he ends up in the cemetery one night, and there's this guy that he went to school that he knows is there, but the guy is dead. And I think, if I can remember correctly, they had to like solve like who killed him or something like that. I can't remember exactly because it's been years since I've read this, but from what I can remember, I know y'all probably like, how the fuck are you giving recommendations and you don't remember the exact plot? I am so sorry. And I have Her Soul to Take. This was more so of like a dark romance book, but like I used to be like a really big fan of dark romance, but then I felt like dark romance kind of like took a turn and it's just not the same anymore, and so I don't really read it as much. I remember reading this one and I was like, this is actually a really good dark romance book, and this is about this girl who goes to this school, and there is a bunch of girls who are like going missing, and this family ends up summoning a demon, and there's this family, and they're like in this cult, and they end up summoning this demon, and the demon actually finds himself really attracted to the girl, and is really and then I think that the family is gonna try to sacrifice the main character, but then the demon and her end up like getting very attracted to each other. It has like a really decent plot. Like, the romance was good. It was very dark because it's dark romance, but also the fact that he was a demon, I think, really added to like the dark romance of it all. Like, it's not just like, oh, he's a mafia, oh, he's a bad boy. Like, no, he's literally a demon. And I have Sign Here, which I remember when this first came out and everybody was talking about it, but then it kind of like died down. I haven't seen anything from this author since, and I personally really enjoyed the book. It's about this family that, it's kind of like a thriller, but not really. It's about this family that has like a bunch of secrets, and there's this guy who is in hell. He's trying to get someone in this family, in a particular family, to sign their life away over to hell, because there's different levels to hell, and the more levels you get up, the higher of the possibility of that you get out, and all he wants is just be out of hell. And so he just needs to get somebody in his family to sign it, and it has like this mystery aspect to it, and his family with like a bunch of secrets, and I just found it really fascinating. And I have Court of the Vampire Queen. This is a romance book, okay? This is 3 books in one, so it's very, very short, very quick. This is like a good book if you're ovulating. I'm not even about to hold you up. It doesn't really have a lot of plot. It's about this girl who's half vampire, half human, and she's sold over to like this really powerful vampire from her father. It doesn't really have a lot of plot. It's basically just smut. Katie Roberts is like one of my favorite like smut. She's like one of my favorite like ovulating authors. Pretty much if I'm ovulating, I'm reading Katie Roberts. If I'm reading Katie Roberts, you know what the fuck is going on. So if you see a wrap up, oh, she was ovulating, because I was. And I just feel like her romances, sometimes they do miss, but for the most part her romances hit for me. And I thought this was like really fun. Like I said, it's 3 books in one, so it's actually very quick. Even though it looks very thick, it's very quick. The next book I have is Horror Store by Grady Hendrix. This is one of my very first Grady Hendrix books I've ever read. This is about this girl who works in IKEA, and she has to, it's been years since I've read this, so she has to stay at work overnight because they think someone is sneaking in and doing freaky shit. And so she ends up, her and some other coworkers end up staying overnight, and it's a horror story, and it's literally looks like an IKEA catalog. Like, that's why I love this book. Grady Hendrix books are like very creative, and it like literally looks like an IKEA catalog. And there's even parts in the book, like the further you go into it, like they're like things like this, but the further you go into it, the more fucking insane they get. Like, that's a literal death trap. Like, that's not a chair, that's a death trap. And it's very much mixed media, and it's a ghost story. But I remember reading this for Halloween when I joined the book community for the very first time, and I had so much fun. Another Grady Hendrix is My Best Friend's Exorcism, and I love this one because this one is supposed to look like a yearbook. There's another one that's paperback that I also own that looks like a VHS tape, but this one is my favorite because it's a yearbook. And yeah, there's like signatures in it, and it's like meant to look like a yearbook. And it's basically the story of 2 young girls who are best friends, and one night them and their entire group of friends end up going to this cabin, and they get in the lake, and something freaky ends up happening to the best friend, and she is no longer the same, and they have to, so the main character has to give her best friend an exorcism. And it's just this beautiful story of like 2 young girls and teen adolescents. And I know a lot of people don't like the way that Grady Hendrix writes women. Personally, I don't find anything wrong with it. Personally, I really enjoy it, or I wouldn't be recommending it to you guys. The Pallbearers Club, this one is very short, very quick. This one I think is only for a certain type of people. Like, I don't think everyone loved this book. I read this book, I love this book because I read this book while I was playing The Sims, and I was like listening to the audiobook, and I just thought it was like very funny. So basically it's about this guy who was in this Pallbearers Club, and he is writing a memoir about what happened during that, with one of the friendships that he made, because he made friends with this girl and he suspected that she was a vampire the entire time. And that same girl is reading his memoir and actually annotating it. So if you go through, like, there'll be annotations throughout the book. Personally, I listened to the audiobook, and they would read the annotations like at the perfect points in the audiobook. I like, this is her annotations, like the red marks, and so I feel like I read it at the perfect time. And so the funny part about the book is like, she's like, no, that didn't fucking happen. Like, he would recount something that happened, and she'd be like, okay, this kind of happened, but like not really. But it's like, you don't actually know what's true and what's not. Like, you don't know which one is telling the truth. And I find it very fascinating. I think a lot, it's not really horror, it's not really scary. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I personally really loved it. So, and it's a vampire story because he thinks she's a vampire. Speaking of vampires, we have the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. This book is what made Grady Hendrix be one of my my favorite authors of all time. This is a vampire story about these moms who are in a book club, and there's this guy who moves in on their street, and everyone starts to really love him at first, but then the main character is like, wait a fucking minute, this man is kind of fucking weird, and then she thinks he's a vampire, so she has to convince the book club he's a vampire, and then the book club has to convince their husbands. But it takes place in the 90s, so of course they don't want to believe women, and I just think it's very fascinating. It's one of my favorite stories of all time. And I love Grady Hendrix, and he has an author's note in the beginning where he talks about how he wrote this for his mom. And so I pretty much, after that, I can kind of see like where the inspiration would come from. And like I said, he mostly writes from the perspective of women, and some people just don't like that, but I don't have an issue with it. And then I have A Diary of Blood, which is one of Dracula's brides, and she is writing letters to Dracula explaining what happened in their relationship, and it was just very toxic and abusive, and it's like it's poly, but it's not like smutty or anything like that. I think it's a very good book. Like I think if you like romance, you'll like this. If you don't like romance, you like this. This book is so interesting because it's literally for anyone. Like there's no particular audience this is going for. The last book for the supernatural section that I want to recommend is Practical Magic. This is actually magic lessons, but they're all the same. I watched Practical Magic for the first time 3 years ago, and I absolutely love it. I watch it every year now. I start reading the book series, and I started reading the book series during the summer, but then I stopped because I was like, I want to finish it off in fall. And so Magical Lessons is the only one that I own so far. But I mean, if you've never seen the movie Practical Magic is about these two sisters who grew up in a family that have a curse, and this curse is that the love of their life will die, and they will hear like a beetle sound when it's time for them to leave. And so everyone in their family is single, and they live with their aunts, and the one main character goes off and she ends up in an abusive relationship, and then the other one, she ends up falling in love and starting a family of her own, and then her husband dies, so now she's back living with the aunts, and then the sister in an abusive relationship calls the other sister for help, and so they end up accidentally killing this man, and so now the police are looking for them. And it's just so much going on in the movie. The book is not similar, but I still think that it's very good, and I think that the series is very fun, very much fall. Like they're just so good. The next section that I have is back to school, because I talk about this in all my videos, but I started going to college. I'm going to be getting my bachelor's in marketing, and then once I'm done with that, I'll be going to get my master's in library science. So I'm going to be going to school for like the next 6 years. I purposely waited to go to school, purposely waited until I was 25 to go to school, because once you're 25, you are counted as an adult and you don't need your parents to fill out your FAFSA, and my mom makes too much money for me to get like a good amount of FAFSA, and so I decided that I was just gonna wait until I was 25 so I could just count for myself, and I did, and it's been going good. So it's been going pretty decent so far. I'm very excited. I'm loving it so far, but I've been romanticizing the fuck out of it, okay? And as we can see, I've been reading a lot of back to school books. Some of the books that I recommended, some are dark academia, some of these just take place in school, okay? Some of it is the start of school, some of it just takes place in a school, but it's not dark academia, because I didn't just want to recommend dark academia, because even though it is my favorite genre, I just like books that take place in a school period. So the first book that I want to recommend is The Raven Cycle. I feel like it's so crazy because when I first joined BookTube, this was one of the very first books that I had picked up, and it took me a whole year to read it, and I love the vibe of the book, but the story itself I just wasn't too much in love with, so I ended up not reading it. And then I think 2 summers ago I did a vlog where I read the entire series, and I actually had so much fun. I ended up growing in love with these characters and the vibe of the book, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. And so if you don't know what The Raven Cycle is, first of all, are you new here? Like, have you ever been in the book community before? But if you don't, this is a BookTube gem. If you go back to like, what was this book published in like 2014, this book was talked about so much. But this book follows this girl named Blue who is cursed. She is cursed that she will kill the person that she kisses. And so she ends up coming across these guys who are the Raven Boys, and she ends up getting swept up in their craziness going on, and I loved it. I am a sucker for only girl in a group of guy tropes. I know it's so like played out, whatever. It was one of my favorite tropes back in my Wattpad days, and so I still chase that high like 10 years later. I'm sorry. So whenever I do get the chance, and it's when she's not, oh, not like other girls, that's when I love it. And Blue to me didn't read like not like other girls, but I guess to other people it could, but to me she didn't. I loved it. Next book I have is Legendborn. If you don't know what this book is, where have you been? It takes place in a college. It is about Bree. I think she's in high school, but she's doing college. She's doing like one of those, I don't know how to explain it, okay, bitch? But she basically ends up getting involved in like some shit, and it's a King Arthur retelling. And I do think that this book is very fun. I just didn't necessarily love it, but I am excited for to continue on with the series. The next book I have is my favorite book of all time, Ninth House, because where would I be if it was not for this series? It's so crazy because when this book came out, I had already read Six of Crows and I had already read the Grishaverse trilogy, and I didn't necessarily love it as much as everybody else did. Nobody really loves the Grishaverse trilogy, but like it was still popular, and I didn't necessarily love it like everyone else did. So I'm like, like maybe this author isn't for me. I didn't know what to expect going into this book, because a lot of times when authors write, you know, when they go from adult to like when they go from YA to adult, like you can still get a sense of them. This book feels like it's written by a completely different person, in my opinion. And so this book is about Alex Stern, who can see grays, and grays are ghosts, and she goes to Yale, and it is about her working with this secret society to just make sure things don't go too crazy when they're doing their secret society things. And it is a mystery about this character who goes missing, but it's also told in the past tense, and there is a reason why for that. And this book has my book boyfriend, which is Daniel Arlington, aka Darlington. I love him so much, and Hellbent is so good. Like, I loved it. This series is just for me. The last book is coming out God knows when. I'm glad it's the last book, because Leigh Bardugo was originally going to make this a 12-book series, and then she reduced it down to 6 books, and then she reduced that down to 3 books, and thank fuck she did, because these books take forever to come out, okay? And I would not wish this upon my worst enemy, like your favorite books coming out every fucking 4 years like it's a leap year. I would not wish this upon my worst enemy, but at the same time, these books are so amazing that they're worth it. Like, it doesn't even fucking matter. Like, when I jump back into the world, it feels like I just read it yesterday, and it's so good. I love it. And Leigh Bardugo went to Yale, and so I just feel like, what are you trying to say, Leigh Bardugo? You trying to say some secret societies exist? We all know secret societies exist, but like, I love secret societies. Like, I love dark academia. Like, it's just so I love it. Speaking of favorite dark academia books is If We Were Villains. I read this book for the first time last summer. I did a video where I did one of those, this book will end when I get 5 stars, and I remember in that vlog I kept getting like 3 stars and 4 stars and 2 stars, and I was like, oh my gosh, will I ever get a 5-star? And I just picked up If We Were Villains, and it was my favorite book of all time. Like, it's not even a 5-star. This is like a fucking 7-star. This one is about these kids who go to this school where they do like Shakespeare plays, and one of them ends up dying, and the main character takes the fall for it. And so this follows the storyline of that, but also in the beginning of the book they're getting out of jail, so he's recounting what happened the entire time, and it's so beautiful. It's so tragic, and it's so gay, and I love it. I have never annotated a book that way that I annotated this. I love this book because it feels like it's so much more to it. As someone who loves Shakespeare, I'm not like a Shakespeare nerd and a Shakespeare know-it-all, but I do love Shakespeare, and so it felt like everything had a deeper meaning. And those are the kind of books that I love, where you can decode things and go through things. And this book, I loved it so fucking much. Now I have pages that look like this, where it's just notes upon notes. And actually, that's my playlist that I made. Just like, I loved it. Like, I would go through the plays and I would write like the themes about them and how it correlated to the book, and if the plays picked were like a deeper meaning or what. And this page is one of my favorite pages because I had so much to say that I had to stick another like notebook of things in here, and it's just one of my favorite things I've ever annotated in my entire life. Like, I highly recommend them, highly recommend it, love it. Next is, we can tell that fucking dark academia is one of my favorite tropes ever, because I'm like, Next is the, oh my gosh, this is another book that I love. Oh my gosh, oh look, another book that I love. And it's just like, okay girl, we fucking get it. Like, what dark academia books don't you love? But another book that I love, and this one isn't necessarily dark academia. This one is about this couple, and what the fuck are these characters' names? David and Reese used to be exes when they were in college, and now they're in this coven together. They're both fighting to be the head of this coven, and Reese is also married to Moira, and then Reese and David kind of spark up this romance that they have, so it is a poly relationship. My only thing about it is that, like, I wish that all three of them would get together, but David is strictly dickly, so it's like, okay, we get it. But I just wish that, like, all three of them could get together. But I love it because Moira's a black girl, and so it's really nice to see yourself represented in one of these books. And Moira is really, like, into, like, the witchy shit, like astrology and tarot. And let me tell you, the author knows what the fuck she's talking about, okay? Like, I do astrology and I do tarot, and it's not something I talk about on my channel a lot anymore, but it is something that I'm into and I practice on a day-to-day basis. And this book, it was just written so well in this book, and it's not something that you see often, because a lot of times authors just kind of do, like, you can tell that she does this, you know, like, you can tell like this is something the author does, and that's what I love about it. Then I have Daily Education, which obsessed with the first and second book. I would say just skip the third book. Like, if you really want to know what happens in it, then read it, but just skip it, okay? But the first and second book have a place in my heart. This is about this girl who goes to this school where there's no teachers, and there are monsters in this school trying to kill you. And there's this boy in this school that she just finds deeply fucking annoying, but he ends up finding himself like interested in her. And so the only way in this school to survive is if you have friends, because that way you can work in teams to like feed off these monsters. And so like the character like won't shower for like days at a time, because if you're alone, these monsters will get you. But like if you have a group of friends, like one person can shower and the other two can stand guard, and then y'all will like switch off. But because she doesn't have any friends, she doesn't shower. So this guy ends up becoming like interested in her, and he ends up like taking her under his wing, but she kind of hates it, but also it helps her out a lot because these monsters, it saves her from the monsters. And I just love this book. It was so good. It was so fun. The first and second book own a place in my heart. I've been talking about these books a lot on my channel because I really love Anne Liang. Like, her books are so well written, and they both take place in school, and she does magical realism in a lot of her books. Almost all of her books takes place in school. So this one, I hope this doesn't find you, is about this girl, and this is like more so academic rivals to lovers, but it's about this girl who is in school and she really wants to do well in school, and there's this guy that does better than her, and they're always battling, and she writes like hate emails to him or to everyone in his class. And one day the hate emails get out somehow, and she doesn't know how, and so her and the guy have to like work together to clean up their mess, because the principal is like, okay, we need you to put y'all to the, like, we need to get this to fucking rest. And so it's really good. The romance is really good. I love it. And then If You Could See the Sun, it's about this girl who feels invisible, and then she can turn invisible, and she ends up starting this website where she helps people out with things. And this guy in school ends up figuring out this guy who's also kind of her rival ends up figuring out her secret, and so they end up working together to do tasks for like people. Like, they would just do things to help people out, and this one was also really fun. And then I have Never Let Me Go, which, let me tell you this right now, okay? This does have a movie with Andrew Garfield, and if you're like me and you're in love with Andrew Garfield, and you're like, oh, I want to picture Andrew Garfield better, so I'm gonna watch the trailer, don't do it, because the trailer has a big spoiler, okay? It's a big spoiler. But this one is about these kids who grow up in this school, and it's a really weird school, okay? It's really weird. And then once they get a certain age, they get sent off to like certain homes with certain families, and it's just like a big, I can't say too much about it because there's like a big plot twist in this one, but it does have Andrew Garfield in the movie. Do not watch the trailer. Do not be like me and watch the trailer, because I got this plot twist spoiled. Now, personally, I love the book anyways. Like, I thought it was just such a good like book. It's like almost dark academia, but not really. And I thought it was just so amazing. It's so fun. It's so good. Don't watch that damn trailer. I'm warning you. Then I have Catalina, which I recently read, and I love this one. It's very short, it's very quick. It's about an undocumented immigrant from Ecuador and how she moved to New York, and she ends up going to Harvard, and she is recounting her life and how she got there, but also just other things that happened. And I just thought this was so great. I love the character Catalina. I just love this story, and I love how, like, as women of color, even though we have completely different backgrounds, we somehow always still relate to each other. Like, I'm not not undocumented, and so there are parts that like I learned like what it's like to be undocumented, and I really appreciated that. There are also points in this book that touches on things like when she talks about how women of color are not afforded to be children because you are automatically sexualized once you hit the age of puberty. And it's just something that like I really love talking about in the community, because I mean, it is true. Once you're a woman of color and you hit puberty, you're no longer seen as a child. You could literally be 12 years old, but if you have a certain body type, you are no longer seen as a child. You are automatically treated as an adult, and it's just something that I'm very passionate about. So the fact that this book touched on it, and it touched on so many other things that I deeply appreciated and I loved it. The last book that we have to talk about for back to school is one of my favorite books, dark academia books ever. Oh my gosh, who shot Catherine House? This one is really fucking weird. Okay, this one has a low Goodreads rating. So if you're one of those people who like to read books that like don't have a high rating, not everyone loves it, like it's kind of weird, this book is for you. This book is about this girl who ends up going to this school named Catherine House, I believe, and the school is just really fucking weird. Like if you don't turn in all your homework, they will strip you booty butt naked and lock you in this tower. Yeah, and it's a college, and it takes place in college, so it's not like it's like fucking high school and you have to do it. But no, it takes place in the college, and it's weird shit going on, and it's just like, what the fuck is this is a complete like what the fuck is going on type of book. And it's a weird book for weird bitches type of book. Okay, I love it. I can't really explain it. Just know if you're weird, if you're into weird shit, this book is for you. Okay, don't ask any more questions, just pick it up. So the next section that I have is horror, and it's a very short section because I am very selective when it comes to my horror. I like really weird things, and then Stephen King. So speaking of Stephen King, the first book that I want to recommend is The Outsider. Not many things scare me, but this definitely spooked the fuck out of me. So this one is about this guy who is arrested because on account of brutally killing a child, but the thing is he didn't do it, and there is evidence that he did do it because he had multiple witnesses and like evidence that he was there, but also he was caught on video at the exact same time in another state, in a whole other state. So it's like this mystery of trying to figure out what happens, and there's basically this thing called the outsider that can, and it's not really a spoiler, but there's this thing called the outsider that can like basically mimic your face, and it's just very like evil and brutal. And it was just like, there was this one scene in particular that I was reading in the dark, and it just scared the living life out of me. But this is just such a good book. Like, I don't know, this is one of Stephen King's best, and this is a recent one. I know a lot of Stephen King fans don't like his recent works. I think I prefer his recent works over his older works, but I'm also a newbie, so. And then I have the Final Girl Support Group. This is not Grady Hendrix. This is not one of Grady Hendrix's best. Okay, a lot of people hate this book. Personally, I like it. I find it very interesting, so I would just say give it a try. This one is about this girl who is a final girl, and she's a part of this support group called the Final Girl Support Group, and there is someone coming after them and taking them out one by one, and it's like now she's the final girl of all final girls, and she has to figure out what's going on but also stop it from happening, so that she's a murderer. And I thought it was really fun. This one, like, every girl has like a story that's based off of like a horror movie. Like, there's one girl whose boyfriend was killing people for her. There's one girl who was basically like, I think it's called Black Christmas, basically like that. Like, it was very fascinating, and I love trying to figure out like what horror movie it was. I thought it was really fun. The ending is very goofy, I'm gonna tell you that. The ending is very goofy, but other than that, it's really fun. Then I have Woman Eating, which this is also like kind of literary fiction, but it is about a woman who's half vampire, half human, half white, half Asian. And it's literally just about her desire to want to eat food. Like, she doesn't really want to be a vampire. She's kind of forced to be a vampire because of her mom. And I think it's a study of like what it's like to be biracial. I just think it's very fascinating. It's very short, very quick. I love it. I love a good vampire story. This could have went in my supernaturals, but I just think of it more as like a horror type of thing. And then I have Mexican Gothic, which this one is more of like a paranormal like type of story. And paranormal aren't really my favorite type of like stories. Like, I don't really like ghost stories, but this is about this girl who ends up going to live with her cousin because something is fishy going on there, and she's trying to figure out what happened. I really like this book because I like the main character, but like, and I think I'm just not a huge paranormal fan, so I think you would like it if you were a paranormal fan. Lastly, for horror books, we have Slewfoot. I love Slewfoot. It's so fucking crazy. Like, Brom has another book that's actually coming out this month, and I'm super excited for it. But Slewfoot is about this girl who, this takes place in like this takes place in like 1666. It actually reminds me of Fear Street 1666 a bit. It's about this woman who was married off to this man, and she actually got very lucky because he was very kind to her, but then his brother sold where they're living and the husband died, so now she has to survive on her own, and these people in this town are just really like disgusting towards her. She ends up getting involved with this demon called Slewfoot, and this book's just very fascinating, and I love it. And I love a good revenge story, to be honest. And also, this book has pictures in it, and I'm obsessed with the art because Brom draws them himself, I believe, and it's just very freaky but very cool. Okay, and so the next section I have is Kids versus Evil. I have a lot of Stephen King books in this section because I think Stephen King writes children very well. So the first book I have is Cycle of the Werewolf, and this one is about this werewolf that comes like every single month and brutally murders people, and everyone in this town is like, what the fuck is going on? We just want our town to be safe. And there's this young boy who takes it upon himself to find out who the fuck the werewolf is. It's very short. It's a graphic novel, but it's literally just a story with pictures. Okay, people are going to tell you it's a graphic novel. There are more readings. There's more reading that you have to do than looking at pictures. Okay, it's a book with pictures in it. All right, but I loved it. Okay, and so another Stephen King book is The Institute, and this is about this boy who has powers. He has like telepathy powers, and he ends up waking up one day in this institute, and he ends up finding out, like, it's very weird, it's very interesting, and over time he ends up finding out that this institute is kind of like testing the children, and he's trying to escape the institute with his friends. And this book connects to Firestarter because I think it's the same like people. I think the people that were looking for the main character in Firestarter are the people who were testing on them, or it's the same like company or something like that. I can't remember exactly. I love how Stephen King books are all somehow interconnected. This is like my second favorite Stephen King book, my first one being It. Damn, I forget how fucking big this book is. This one being It. I sprayed the edges myself. I think I did a fantastic job. Unlike, I sprayed 11, 22, 63 pages by myself. Terrible. Came out looking like shit. I think this one came out looking fantastic. This is such a huge book. I remember I read this one for Halloween one year, and it was just so much fun. I love the movie. I literally have a tattoo. Like, I love this story. It's about Pennywise, but they call him It, but his name is Pennywise, and he comes every 27 years to murder a bunch of people in this town. And one year he ends up terrorizing these children, and so it follows the first time they ever see him, and then 27 years later when they're adults and they are sick and tired of being scared of him, so they band together to come back and kill him. But it's just about friendship. It's about this found family that they found within each other. These are these kids who weren't very popular. They felt like losers, and they felt like outcasts in their family, in their neighborhoods, in their school, and they all come together, and then they grow up and they disconnect, and then they have to come back a few years later and relearn relearn each other as adults. And I just love this story. I love the Losers Club. Like, they mean everything to me. Clearly, I only have 2 tattoos, and I remember when I saw It, I was like, I'm gonna get a tattoo of this one day. And I've been waiting. I got my tattoo in like I got my tattoo in 2022. I have been waiting since I saw this movie in 2017 to get that tattoo. Okay, like, I love this story. And I have Over the Woodward Wall, which is a very short, quick story. It's about 2 kids who live on the same street, but they go to 2 different schools and they never cross paths until one day they have to take the same path to their 2 different schools, and they end up coming across this wall and they end up going over it. So now they have to figure out how to get back home from this wall. It's called the Up and Under series, so they have to like go up. I don't write the rest, but I think I will. It's very quick. It reminds me of Over the Garden Wall meets Alice in Wonderland. Over the Garden Wall is like one of my favorite TV shows ever. I watch it for Halloween every year, and this book reminded me of it a little bit. And we have Small Spaces, which is about this girl who is on this school field trip, and she ends up seeing that the scarecrows are, she ends up reading a story about these scarecrows that come to life, and then the scarecrows actually end up coming to life, and she's like a loner, and she ends up forming a friendship with 2 other kids in their school. And it's a whole series, and it follows different seasons, so this one just takes place in fall, which is why I'm recommending it. This isn't Kids versus Evil. I meant to put this in the horror section, but I completely forgot. But things have gotten worse since we last spoke. I love this. This one is about this girl who's selling an apple peeler and someone who's looking to buy it. And it's really freaky. It's disgusting. When I say freaky, I'm not gonna, oh, it's weird. It's disgusting. And I loved it. I have not loved an Eric LaRocca book since this. Like, I've read almost all of their works, and they just don't work for me the way that this one does. I need them to get back into whatever bag this was. Going back to Kids versus Evil, the last book that I have is A House at the Bottom of the Lake. This isn't necessarily Kids versus Evil. This is about 2 kids who go on a first date, and so for their first date, they end up getting on like this boat. And so one of them ends up going into the water and finding that there's this house of wax at the bottom of the lake. And so they end up becoming very fascinated with this house at the bottom of the lake. So it's not like they have to defeat evil, but it is about 2 kids. And I want to include it because it's not necessarily horror, but it kind of is. And there's like this ending. It has like an open ending, so if you're not into that, then don't read it. But it's by the same person who wrote Bird Box. And I have not loved a Josh Malerman book the way that I love this one. Since this one's like a complete 5-star to me. And it's just very fascinating and very quick, and I love it. So read it. Next section that I want to talk about with you guys is sci-fi fantasy, one of my favorite genres ever. And the first book that I want to talk about is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. This is like a very like classic booktube book. Oh my gosh, it's starting to get darker, but I feel like that's like really helping the vibes a little bit. This is one of the very first books that I read when I joined booktube, and this is about these 2 people who are friends, and they, for their college like theses, I think, they end up believing that if you come close to death, then if you come close enough to death, then like you can get superpowers. And so they end up experimenting on that, and they both do get superpowers, but then one becomes evil and one becomes good. But like, it's like, so you start off the book rooting for one person, but then you end up rooting for the other person. At least that's what people used to say when, like, back in book 2. But I remember reading it, and I rooted for the same person the entire time, and it was the evil one, because I knew real when I read it. And it's just a very fascinating story. It does have a sequel. I've never read it. I love the first book. Didn't even care to read the sequel. Like, I'm sorry. That I have to talk about is Mistborn, the first book being The Final Empire. This one is in a world where the villain wins, and so now everyone is under like his, I don't want to say control, like he's controlling people, but like under his ruling. And so someone recruits the main character in this heist, and so this series follows the heist, and it is like literally a fantasy heist. I love fantasy heists, so if you love fantasy heists, definitely check this out. But I feel like Brandon Sanderson's books really are really good to read like in the fall. They're like really like fall reads. The next book I have to talk about is Skyward, another Brandon Sanderson book. This one is actually a YA sci-fi book, and I'm not really into like YA, but I absolutely love this series. I am behind, but I do love this series. So this book is about this girl named Spencer. This is about this girl named Spencer who is shunned out by her community because her dad used to be a pilot for ships, and then he took off on one ship. He like got scared and took off on the ship, and so now everyone sees her and her family as like the family of this man who was a coward. And so now she's entering this pilot academy, and everyone like looks down on her, so she now is trying to prove that she is better than her dad. And I just think this is such a fun like sci-fi book. I think if you're trying to get into like space sci-fi, this is definitely a start, but it just feels so fall. And then I have Babel, which, yes, I should have put in the back to school section, but I forgot about it. I mean, it is fantasy as well, so it really doesn't matter which one I put it in. This one is just a classic dark academia about someone who goes to this school, and it is about language and colonialism, and it's fantasy as well. So I think that a lot of people love this book. I thought it was like fine. I thought it was like a 3-star read, but a lot of people love this book, and I think you can go no wrong with Earl Kwan, to be honest. And then I have one of my favorite books ever, which is Hinch. This is a superhero story. I always recommended for people who love The Boys or Gen V. And this one is about this girl who is a henchman, and she's kind of like a temp service henchman. And so one day she's fighting this superhero, and he ends up breaking her leg. So then she goes to the police like, hey, like, I need some workers comp, I need something. The police are like, yeah, no, we're not gonna do that. And so she's like, what the fuck? So now she is out to get revenge on this superhero because she is out of work because she has a broken leg and she has nothing to do about it. So then she ends up working with the villain, the superhero's arch nemesis, and she is now trying to take him down. If you love superheroes, this book is for you. I love this book. The sequel is coming out, I don't know when, but I am waiting for it, and I love it. Bones of Ruin. This book is not talked about on BookTube a lot, and this book is about this black girl. This is a black girl on the cover. The trilogy is complete now, I believe, but it is about this black girl who is a tightroper, and it's more so like, and she has this power that she doesn't, I think she doesn't, it's some type of power, like she doesn't die or something like that. Yeah, it's this power that she like doesn't die, or she does die but she can come back to life. And so this guy ends up recruiting her because there's part of her history that she just doesn't remember. And so this guy is like, if you help me, I'll help you. And so she ends up being recruited in like this X-Men type of thing, and I thought it was really fun. I absolutely love this book. Like, it's so fun. I do need to continue on with the series, but definitely fall. And it's about this black girl who has like 4 guys in love with her, and I love it. Okay, I don't care. Sorcery of Thorns, my favorite book of all time. There was somebody who recommended to me, they were like, oh, like, I don't know if you've read Sorcery of Thorns, but I think you would love it. And I'm like, girl, this is one of my favorite books of all time. I just don't talk about it a lot because I don't talk about my favorite books of all time until it's like time to. But the fact that people know me so well that they would look at Sorcery of Thorns and be like, Mariana would love this book. And you're not wrong, because I do. So thank you to that person who commented, because you know me very well, clearly. But yeah, Sorcery of Thorns, this is like, if you love Howl's Moving Castle, this one is for you. I know Howl's Moving Castle, I love Howl's Moving Castle. I know Howl's Moving Castle gets like people write like Howl's Moving Castle inspired books a lot, but if anyone has like a Ponyo inspired book, please let me know, because I actually grew up on Ponyo. I didn't watch Howl's Moving Castle until like a few years ago, but I grew up watching Ponyo. It has like such a deep place in my heart. Like, I didn't know that Studio Ghibli was a thing when I watched Ponyo, and I remember watching it and being like, oh my gosh, I wish there were more movies like this. Whole time there were, but I just want something that feels like Ponyo because I love it. It's such a sweet story. But anyways, this one is inspired by Howl's Moving Castle, and it's about this girl who works in this library where the books can kind of like talk and whatnot. And so she ends up basically being accused of murder, and so now she's on the run with this guy named Nathaniel Thorne. There's a sword called Demon Slayer. There is this guy who's like a demon, and he can turn into a cat, I think. And he's kind of like Calcifer from Howl's Moving Castle, and it's so, I love it. I love it. It's literally like, I think a lot of things are like, oh, if you love Howl's Moving Castle, you'll love this one. But this one is like the book to recommend if you love Howl's Moving Castle. And then we have The Name of the Wind. I have 2 copies of this actually, but this one goes on my black bookshelf, so I have to keep them separated, and I hate it. But The Name of the Wind is like the fall book. I have not read the sequel. I refuse to read the sequel until I get announced that the 3rd book is coming out. Also, this one just means so much to me because this one, the last half of the book takes place in a school, and I love that plotline so much. But then at the end of the book, he leaves the school, and so I end up, like, I get scared that I'm not gonna love the second one as much as I love this one, because I love the school that he went to so much. So that's why I haven't continued on with it. I don't know how to exactly describe this book, so I'm really just gonna read this to you. There is a legend of a man of many names, of many talents, a magician, beggar, thief, student, alchemist, and assassin. He is Ilar, the clever one, finger and 6 string, but now he is known as Kavote the Bloodness, Kavote the Arcane, Kavote King Killer. You may have heard of him. And so yeah, I love this one because this also is about alchemy, and alchemy is one of my favorite things in fantasy, but you don't see it a lot in fantasy, but it is used often. But it's not like, I don't know, I wish it was used more in fantasy. Then you have The Night Circus, which this is the fall book. Okay, this one is about this circus that comes around, you never know when, and it disappears. It's about these 2 characters who meet at the night circus, and they end up falling in love. But it's so much more than that, and so much more fascinating. I want to I'm due for a reread because I actually haven't reread this book since I got it. but I remember this book was like also one of the booktube darling books, and I had steered away from it because I thought I wasn't gonna like it because it doesn't really have a plot. I have is a recent read of mine, and this is Dungeon Crawler Carl, and this one is about this guy who ends up in this apocalypse where everyone is now in a dungeon and you now have to get through levels, and it basically is broadcasting this TV show for aliens and like people around the world. And so he wants to get on this show just so he can, you know, stay alive. And there's also this cat named Donut who actually becomes talking at one point, and so then she's referred to as Princess Donut. And I just think it's so creative because the cat is like his ex-girlfriend's cat, and I think the story is like so creative. And I remember when I was first reading it, I was gonna DNF it. Plot immediately kicks in. As soon as the plot kicked in, it was so fascinating. I've never read anything like it, and this is one of the most fun fantasy books I've read in a long time. Like, yes, I read good fantasy books, like there's so many fantasy books where I'm like, oh my gosh, this was so good, but this one was so fun. Like, I didn't have to think too hard. It does have a lot of world building, but I don't care because I think it's so fascinating, and you don't have to think too hard. It doesn't have any crazy names. It's really about a normal, regular, everyday guy who ends up getting put into like a fantasy-esque type of game. The entire series is available on Kindle Unlimited, but Berkeley is releasing new hardcovers for them, and I'm obsessed with the hardcovers, so I'm collecting them. And lastly, where would I be if I wasn't gonna recommend Middle Game? This book is about these two twins who are separated, and actually the book that I recommended earlier, Over the Garden Wall, this book is actually referenced in this book. So I forgot to mention that this book is based off of Middle Game. You don't have to read them together, but it's still really fun. But it is about these two twins who are separated at birth. One's named Roger and one's named Dodger, and they end up having this thing called a quantum entanglement, where it's like they can like hear each other in their brains, and so they end up finding each other throughout life, but also their memories end up getting erased. So they keep like finding each other and getting erased. And it is a story about alchemy and like a mad scientist, and I absolutely love this book. One, because it's about alchemy, but I think it's so creative, and it's insane that it's been years since I've read this book and I still remember that the name that they use for what they have is called a quantum entanglement. Do you know how insane that is that I can remember that? Okay, I can't remember what I had for dinner yesterday, but I can remember that it's called a quantum entanglement. So my next section is thrillers, and the first thriller that I want to recommend is a YA thriller actually called Everyone's Thinking It. And this book takes place in a boarding school, and it's about this girl who loves to take pictures. So one day the pictures are stolen from her and they are used to blackmail a bunch of people in the school. So these people actually end up teaming up to figure out what the hell is going on. There's a huge cast of characters, a Gibbs File family, and it's such a good quick book to read. And then the next one is Twyford Code, and I am a pretty big fan of Janice Hallett, but for some reason all of her books except for Twyford Code are like 3 stars to me. Twyford Code was a 4-star book, and I think it was because I love a story that feels like there's something more going on, something that needs to be decoded, something that has a deeper meaning. And this one is about these kids who are in this specific class for this teacher, and there's this book that they had, and the book was actually a banned book, so the book ends up being taken away from them, and then the teacher actually ends up dead, and so no one can recount correctly what happened. I think it's either the main characters or the main character's son, I can't remember which one, is on a journey to find this book or out like what the fuck is going on. Every single one of Janice Hallett's books are mixed media. This one is told recording through an iPhone 4, I believe, so it's told through recording. So I think this one is best to listen to the audiobook of. I kind of did both audiobook and reading on my Kindle because ever since I got my Kindle I've been insane on that thing. Then for my physical reads, I have The Best of Friends, and I actually really like this author, Lubinda Berry. You can find a lot of her books on Kindle Unlimited. This one is about these group of moms that were best friends, and they all had sons who were best friends. And so one day these moms are all at home and the group of guys are hanging out, and then they hear a gunshot go off in the neighborhood. So all the moms are like, oh my gosh, like it's probably our son. So all the moms end up figuring out that it's their sons, and they go rushing to the house. One is dead, one is in a coma, and one is too traumatized to speak. And so you're following the mystery of what happened. And this one is pretty short. It's only about 200 pages, and I love a good thriller that knows how to get the fuck to the point, okay? Then we have When No One Is Watching. This one is essentially about gentrification. It's about this woman who lives in New York, and she's noticing, it's about this black woman who lives in New York, and she's noticing that everyone in her neighborhood is disappearing. And so it's just about that and like this mystery of like why they were disappearing. And I really love this book. I thought this was a thriller debut from this author, because she wrote romance before, and you can definitely tell because there is a romance subplot. And I don't particularly like romances in my thrillers, but I thought this one was actually really good. Then we have Jar of Hearts, and this one is about this girl who is in jail because her boyfriend killed her best friend, and she was an accessory to murder because she helped him get rid of the body. And so this is about her being in jail and finally getting out, and then these murders start happening again that are very similar to how her best friend died. She's like, how the fuck did this happen? I just thought this was really good. It reminded me of Scream, to be honest. It just reminded me of Scream, and I thought it was really fascinating. The first half of this book, she is in jail, but the part after that where she gets out, I feel like it's so good and like fascinating. Then we have some Karen Slaughter books, because how do you do autumn without Karen Slaughter? So the first one I have to talk about is Pretty Girls. And if you don't know Karen Slaughter is really fucking dark, okay? My sister loves her some Karen Slaughter, all right? Karen Slaughter is dark as fuck. So if you're not for that, then don't read her, don't pick up her books. But Pretty Girls is, it's a very long story. So Pretty Girls is about these girls who are all sisters. When they were younger, their eldest sister ended up going missing, and so they got older, they kind of became estranged, and one of them ends up married, and one day her and her husband are on a date. Her husband ends up getting brutally murdered in front of her, but then after her husband is murdered, she ends up finding out a bunch of really freaky things. And this story is very fascinating. It's very dark, it's very fucked up, it was literally insane, and I loved it. And then also by Karen Slaughter, we have The Good Daughter. So this one is about these two sisters who are at home one day, and they are in a home invasion. These two guys break into their home because of their father, but their father isn't home. So then he kills their mother and their grandma, and then he takes them both back out into the woods, and he says he lets them pick who he shoots. And so one life is ruined and the other one is left behind because of this thing that happened to them. It's like standalones, and then she also has like series. A lot of her standalones follow like sister and estranged sisters, because she also has one called False Witness, which is also about estranged sisters. And so I just find them like very fascinating as someone who has a sister, but me and my sister are actually very close. And then continuing on with fucked up thrillers, we have one of my favorite, which is The Night Swim. I would suggest looking up the trigger warnings before reading any of these, but this one is one of my favorites. This one was so good. I remember when I worked at Target, I was listening to the audiobook of this. There was one point when I like literally had to go to the bathroom so I could cry. So I work in the style section of Target, and it was like the fitting room and things like that. And I remember the exact night I was working in the shoe section and we were about to close, I literally had to go to the bathroom to cry because I just could not handle it. And I used to sneak and listen to my AirPods. Like, we weren't really allowed to, but I would have my AirPods in and I would have like a wig on to like hide my ear, and it was literally insane. Anyway, so this book is about this woman who has a podcast, and on this podcast she talks about like true crime and things like that. And so someone contacts her and is like, hey, there's this big mystery that happened in my town, could you help me figure it out? But then she also is going to cover this court case that also happened in this town, and I just found it very fascinating. It's very sad, but it was just so good and I just loved it. For Your Own Good. But this is set at a prestigious private school, so a high school, and it's about these parents who will do whatever it takes to make sure that their students have good grades, and there's a teacher who wants to teach everybody a lesson. Okay, when I first read this book, I ended up giving it 4 stars, but I could not stop thinking about this book to where I went back and I ended up giving it 5 stars because it was so fun and it was so good. And lastly, for thrillers, I have Big Little Lies. This one isn't really a thriller, but it kind of is, because basically somebody dies at the start of the book and you don't know who did it or what, but it also follows this mystery of this woman who moves into town and her son is accused of hitting one of the girls. And so now this woman is also ostracized from this small town, and she ends up becoming friends with the mothers and ends up in their dramas. Love it. I love the TV show. One of my favorite TV shows of all time. I would reread this if this wasn't so fucking long, to be honest. Now down to our last section, which is graphic novels. Okay, So first book I want to recommend is Fangs, and this follows a vampire and a werewolf who is in love with each other. It's such a cute and lovely story. Love it. I have Pumpkinheads, which is about two best friends who work in a pumpkin patch. One of them is in love with each other. I can't remember which is which, but they also don't want to like ruin the friendship. But it's so cute, and I love it. And it's just them going through like this pumpkin patch, and there's so many things. I love pumpkin patches personally, and I reread this every fall because it's so quick and it's so cute, and I wish there was more. Fake Blood, which this one is a graphic novel, but it's the length of a novel. It's like 300 pages, and this is about this boy who has this crush on this girl, and has an obsession with vampires. So he decides that he's going to pretend to be a vampire. So it turns out that the love interest is a vampire hunter, and she's trying to kill him. And then he is like, oh my gosh, I'm not really a vampire. But she's like, bitch, somebody is a vampire here. And it's just really cute, and I loved it. And we have Gotham Academy, and this one is more so for people who like superheroes, but you don't need to know anything about DC or superheroes to read it. And this one is about this girl named Violet who goes to this school, and her mom is put in Arkham, which is like the insane asylum in Gotham, and she is dealing with that, but also having to go to like this school, and these monsters are attracted to her. She ends up forming this found family friendship with these other people, and they end up like solving these mysteries. It got discontinued, but I love it. It's one of my favorite graphic novels of all time. And I love the found family because I love those found families where it's like they aren't like, they kind of don't like each other. I love those. It kind of reminds me of Jumanji, the remakes, which I love Jumanji. I don't like a lot of reboots or remakes, but the Jumanji reboot is so good. And it reminds me of that, where it's like they're not friends with each other. They don't really like each other, but they somehow all end up becoming friends. Those are my favorite type of found families, and I don't feel like they're written about a lot. And then we have Through the Woods, which is stories about these woods, and it just follows like different things that happen throughout the woods. And it's just it's more of like a horror type of thing, but very spooky, very perfect for autumn. And then lastly, the very last book that I have to recommend, and then I'll be done. I've been sitting here from sunrise to sun end, okay, is Paper Girls. And this one is more of a sci-fi story. It's about these girls who end up meeting their future selves, and they do paper runs, they deliver paper to the neighborhoods, and they end up running into their future selves, and somehow they end up going to the future to like meet back up with their future selves. And I just think it was so fun. It was discontinued, and then it got turned, I don't know if this was discontinued, I think it was turned to an Amazon show, but then it got canceled. I don't know, but I remember thinking it was really good. I loved it. It was a booktube darling back in the day. Whew. I'm finally done. Oh my gosh, I've been here for so long. But if you like this video, thank you for watching this. I hope that you found some books in here that you could recommend, and be sure to check out Kari's video, because even though I also did a really long recommendations video, I feel like our recommendations are actually very different from each other. So definitely check out Kari's video. But don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.